Hi, Dr. Grandin.
Yep, I came on early, so I
That's
didn't
her. No, you're perfect.
need
Oh
to.
my, it is such a honor to meet you. Um, I'm Mina Tadimeti, and I um, I have been kind of for the past 10 years trying to um, get our community more aware that they can help their children with special needs, despite the limited resources and so forth. And so um, it's a real privilege to talk to you
Thank
today.
you.
And as I mentioned, I would like to show our recorded interview with our parents who will show up for the sixth annual Health and Wellness Conference on November 2nd. And so it will be, and I'll send you the agenda. We have it highlighted that your session is a part of the day's agenda. And
Okay.
so and so that way they can hear you talk about the things that are they're thinking a lot about. And so I wanted to just mention that to you. And so I didn't know if you had any questions for me before we get started.
Well, I got the questions about hidden painful medical behavior, severe behavior problems.
Right. Did
And
you
then
get the
ABA.
did you get the email that I just sent with the list of questions? It's the
Yeah, I
same.
just got one that had three
Okay.
questions on it.
Okay, good. Good. That's what I was hoping for. Because
Yes, I did get that.
I know you wanted to talk about the hidden painful medical condition. So I wanted to make sure that it was on the list of questions so I also don't forget it.
Well, and that's really important. I was just at a big conference and I really talked about that. And I had two people come up to me.
Okay. You can hear me, correct?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute privilege and honor to introduce you to a truly remarkable individual today. I am honored to introduce you to an international icon in both livestock industry and autism community, Dr. Temple Grandin.
Great to be here.
Hello, Dr. Grandin. On behalf of special needs in my city families, educators, and supporters, welcome to our sixth annual Health and Wellness Conference.
Great to be here.
Thank you. You know, as I was preparing for this interview with you, I really enjoyed reading so much about your incredible contributions to both industries, that is, the livestock industry, with your innovative designs for livestock handling facilities that have revolutionized the industry, and to the autism community, which has no doubt inspired countless people and professionals around the world. So thank you for everything that you do, especially for us in the autism community. Um, grateful for everything you do for us. Um, One thing I wanted to mention also was that in our several conversations this past month, I found most of your um, approaches that you shared very applicable to individuals with other types of developmental disabilities, not necessarily autism.
That's right.
And so I say, parents, listen in because you are going to find everything she says very much applicable to your child who may not have autism or may have dual diagnosis with autism in the picture. So I guarantee you, you will walk away with some gold nuggets that you will start to think about and to help your child. So today's session, we are going to cover three areas which most of you wanted help with. And the first is on self-harm and aggression, often referred to as dual harm. And Dr. Grandin will also speak about um, the hidden painful medical conditions that are in this category of behavioral and emotional challenges. And next, she will help us understand the communication challenges that we face with our children. And lastly, uh, she will address, this constant concern of, ABA therapy sessions with schooling demands. And so I know that is on the minds of many here today. So, and I know all of you are eager to hear her. So let's begin. Dr. Grandin, let's touch on the first theme, which is behavioral and emotional challenges. We have children with autism who have co-occurrence of self-harm and aggression behaviors, often termed dual harm. Parents often feel defeated in this situation, and I would like you to talk a little bit about this aspect, get your thoughts and insights, and if you would, please talk about the hidden painful medical conditions mistaken as behavioral issues with our children.
Well, if you have a child or adult that can't communicate, they can't tell you their stomach hurts or their ear hurts or some other thing hurts. And one of the big problems I'm running into is doctors will just go, oh, well, it's just autistic. But then when you really dig into it, you find out there's a legitimate medical problem. I was just at a conference last week, really emphasizing the issue of hidden painful medical problems. I had two people come up to me after the meeting. One autistic person had a very severe urinary tract infection that got up into the kidneys, and another one had a bad ear infection. Another case I heard about was a nonverbal girl was rubbing her ear, and they looked in her ear, and there was pieces of an earbud down her ear.
Oh, wow.
And these are recent. And then another common thing is acid reflux. I have some acid reflux. So let's just go over the things you need to rule out. Hidden painful medical. Constipation. That can cause pain. Urinary tract infections. Yeast infections. Untreated acid reflux and heartburn problems. Check the ears for an ear infection. Make sure they don't have a bad tooth. These are easy things that can be checked. You want to rule that out first when there's a behavior problem, especially if the person has been good. I'm referring mostly to nonverbal, and now all of a sudden they're bad. That's often a key that there is a hidden painful medical.
Mm-hmm.
And one case of a young adult, highly restricted diet, and he was getting swelling and weird symptoms. The doctor just said, well, it's autism. Well, I asked the mom what the individual was eating, and I'm old enough to have taken the old home economics lessons where you learn about the vitamin deficiency diseases. And the minimum daily requirement is based on the amount of vitamins you'd have to take to prevent scurvy or beriberi or these other vitamin deficiency diseases. And his diet was very deficient in vitamin C. He had scurvy. And they put him on supplements, and it cleared right up. That was within the last 6 months. This is real recent stuff. This isn't stuff from, 20 years ago. This stuff's being misdiagnosed now. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm more of an engineer. So I have to troubleshoot stuff rather than diagnose. But you have to rule out hidden painful medical. This is coming up all the time. And then the next issue is frustration because they can't communicate. That can cause a lot of behavior problems. Got to have a way to communicate, even if it's just a picture board, a few sign language signs, something to communicate with. Really important. And there's some non-speaking autistic adults that can learn to type independently. That's something that needs to be introduced. And there's some very good books written by non-speaking individuals who type completely independently. Nobody's holding their wrist, nobody's touching them. And one of them is Tito Mukhopadhyay, and his book is How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? How can I talk if my lips don't move? And then there's the Japanese boy who wrote the reason I jump, but there's a sequel to The Reason I Jump. It's even better, has a lot more insight. He talks about problems like not being able to control movement. But some of these people can learn to type independently, but I recommend using a tablet, the regular tablet computer, because they have a problem with gaze shifting. So if I take this desktop that I'm on now and look way down there at the keyboard, and the print appears way up here, they cannot do the gaze shift. That's why you use a tablet. And years ago, a real enterprising teacher put the computer keyboard on a box, so the print appeared right next to the keyboard. And that worked. Laptops don't work that well. It's also important to use screens that don't flicker, and tablets do not flicker. Also, laptops don't flicker, but the keyboard is too far away. So those are things that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
I like to just pass along some practical things you can do, but this hidden painful medical, when I've just in the last few months, I've been bringing it up in my talks, and I'm getting just horror story after horror story, people coming up to me after my talk and telling me about the latest problem they had.
Mm. And that, I think you hit on a very important point, because regardless of what your child's diagnosis is, as parents, we quickly attribute, especially when they're much younger, we attribute it to the disability, and forget that a typical child could also be going through this, and that hidden medical condition that they're not able to communicate. And we are not attributing that it could
Well,
be.
the scurvy was a young adult. It's not a child. He ate a
Okay.
very, very limited diet.
Mhm.
So I'm concerned anyone who eats such a limited diet might be a really good idea to just give them a multiple vitamin. That would prevent a vitamin deficiency disease. And then there's some where they may not be eating enough protein. That can cause some serious problems, some of these limited diets. But there's a tendency for the doctor to go, well, it's the autism, or let's say some other condition. It's just his diagnosis that's causing this problem.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the first thing, especially if the behavior suddenly gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a key tip off. That's hidden painful medical. You need to track it down and try to find it. Those tests are simple. Yeast, urinary tract infections. Is he constipated? Is he grabbing at his stomach? You can look in the ears. You can probably tap teeth and find one that's sore.
We have many families, and I've seen this recently at a picnic, with their 4-year-olds. They come, and these children, you know, don't want to be there. And they're starting to have aggression, and in the way they express. And pretty soon the parents have to leave within 5 minutes of their arrival, because the kid doesn't want to be there for all the reasons that are obvious. And so I wondered if when it's self-harm and aggression, is it possible that there are other things that are causing it, such as perhaps home environment? Is it um, stressful? Is it abuse of some sort? I mean, there's
Well,
so
it's
many
always,
reasons.
you have to look at all those things too. But the sensory overload can cause a lot of behavior problems. You're in the middle of a super loud football game or something like that. I just went to our football game last Friday. It was super loud. And I thought there'd be some autistic kids that would not be able to tolerate this.
Mm. I
Much
know.
louder now than it was when I was a kid going to football games. Much, much louder.
Yeah, yeah.
So those kind of sensory overload, sort of thing can be a problem.
Mm-hmm. And I see this even in children that don't have autism, that have sensory challenges. And, I know mine personally, she cannot handle pep rallies at schools, any kind of football games. The noise is way too loud. So I'm seeing this even in, other children outside of children that have autism. So very much,
What
very
you
true.
might try doing is make a really good audio recording of that football game or that pep rally. And it has to be a high quality audio recording, and let the child or adult control that audio recording. Because when a loud noise can be controlled, that helps them to learn to tolerate it. Now, then you take things like a vacuum cleaner or a hairdryer, then the individual turns that on and off. And there's been families where the vacuum cleaner went to the favorite play toy, and it used to be the most scary, awful thing. When the child or adult could turn it on off. Control is very important. You can control the sound. One family took their kid down to the firehouse and they let them ring the siren. That helped a whole lot. Maybe go in after school when school is closed and ring the school bell 50 times. Sometimes these can help control. Another problem I've run into is a kid wears headphones all the time.
Yeah.
It will make sound sensitivity worse. If you've ever had wax in your ears and the doctor takes it out, then all of a sudden your hearing sounds louder. That's because your brain was compensating for the wax blockage. I've had that happen. Lots of people have. But what you want to do with the headphones is have them with you. That's control. But try not to wear them. Now, certain very noisy stuff, yeah, you put them on. I would say for a lot of autistic kids, the football game, the loud one that we have, would be a place to put the headphone on. Or the fire alarm goes off. You put the headphone on. You have it with you. That gives you control. But there have been kids that wore headphones all the time, and the child was not able to tolerate a quiet family dinner. They had gotten so sound sensitive. But the element of control is really important. You have it there if you really, really need it. And I've talked to people that have been able to get rid of headphones completely by doing that.
I never thought to do that. I never thought to record the sounds that mine has trouble with, the ambulance noise, the police siren. I always try to explain to her that that's part of our environments, but then she would cover her ears. But I never thought
Maybe
that
she needs to sit in a police car and be allowed to turn it on.
that's a good one. I never thought
No,
about
but
that.
this has
Yeah,
actually worked. And one
yeah.
family did it, the firehouse, and it actually worked. It also makes it less unknown. Somebody pushes a switch and that thing comes on. But there's a lot of noisy things that the child could turn the actual thing on and off. Hair dryer, electric drill. I'm a big fan of getting kids into shop classes. And they're going, what are we going to do about all the sensory issues? Well, you go down in the shop and you just get that electric drill. You're controlling it and just start drilling holes in metal and wood and all kinds of stuff. And where the adult or the kid is making a noise, that helps a whole lot. It reduces the startle factor. These are just simple things that you can try.
Sure. Very, very, very good point. Never thought about that. Doing it that way. You talked about in a lot of what I read, there was one theme that really stands out that you mentioned, and that has to do with stretching their comfort zones, getting
Yes.
them out of their comfort zones. And when I heard you speak about that, it really hit home. And I wondered if you could address that piece under this issue, because when they're so comfortable with what they're doing on a daily basis, the behaviors seem to be controlled. But the minute you take them out of that, which is, as you say, is necessary to stretch their comfort levels, I wondered if you could touch
Well,
on
give
what
them
you
some
meant by that.
choices. Give them some choices. Now, there's certain things I'm not going to shove them into. I can't do rapid multitasking. We're not going to put them on the McDonald's takeout window. That's just chaos. Or a chaotic Christmas wrapping station. We're not going there. There's plenty of other jobs that don't have that kind of multitasking chaos. All right, let's get them out of the house. They could try maybe 2 different sports. Try different things, but choices. When I had the opportunity to go to my aunt's ranch, I was afraid to go. Not going wasn't a choice. The choice was going for a week and coming home, or going or deciding to stay all summer. That was the choice. And when I had to go to a special school after throwing a book at a girl who bullied me, mother actually picked out 3 schools and we visited them. She let me choose. See, giving the adult some control. You can do karate or hockey. I'm just making stuff up.
Sure.
You could do a sewing class or theater. You have some choice, but we're going to get out of the house.
But then isn't it much harder as they get older? Because you can't lift them and, you can't guide them to making those choices that they want to make because they're much, older, and you can't really move, 150-pound.
Well, the other thing is we're cutting down the surprise factor. There's slow processors. I remember years ago, I talked to a really innovative staff member at a group home, and they're all nonverbal clients. They had a lot of behavior problems. And what they did to improve behavior was when it was time to take a shower, they gave them a washcloth, maybe 5 minutes beforehand. Time to go on the bus, they gave them a toy bus to hold. It's time to have breakfast, give them a spoon to hold. But they gave it to them maybe a few minutes beforehand because they're very, very slow processors. So they knew what was coming up. It was basically a touch schedule. They said the behavior problems went way, way down. This was adults, autism, and intellectual disability, non-speaking, and 5 minutes before shower time, they held the washcloth. And then when it's time to get dressed, hand them the shirt.
Mm.
Kind of a touch schedule. 5 minutes before breakfast, hand them a spoon. 5 minutes before we're going to get on the bus, hand them a toy bus. You see that? You see, then nothing is a surprise. Surprises scare. Okay, now what do we do about we got to go to the airport or someplace like that? The more you can make it not a surprise. You can look at videos. You can go out and watch planes take off. You can do that at any airport. Don't watch planes take off. Learn more about it. Things you learn about become interesting. Then you might want to go on that plane. Well, that's really cool. Look at how those planes take off. Okay. In fact, at some airports, TSA has a program where you can actually practice going through security. And some airports will even let you sit on an empty airplane.
Oh.
It depends upon the airport. They don't all do that.
Sure.
But let's say your airport doesn't do that. Well, let's look at what you can do. Videos showing security procedures. And they have to be warned that the TSA people might touch them. Well, you could practice that at home. So it's not a surprise. The surprises scare.
That's true.
And so they know that up front. Usually they don't touch you, but sometimes they do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know that. Now, depending upon the intellectual level, well, yeah, they're going to look inside your bag. It's actually kind of cool. That anything that makes something potentially scary interesting. I used to be scared of flying because when I was a senior in high school, I was in an extremely scary emergency landing, and we had to go down the slides, and they told us to run, and very scary. I was white knuckles after that. And one of the things that helped me get over it is I had to make aviation interesting. And I got a chance to fly in the cockpit of a very large airplane that was flying Holstein heifers out of the Miami airport to Puerto Rico. Now it became interesting. It makes scary stuff interesting. That can really help. But you want to reduce the surprise factor. Like the security guards may touch them. I don't want that to be a surprise.
Very good point.
These are things that can help them. And then, of course, obviously, I'm not a big fan of video games all day, but the airplane's one place where we can do a video game for the entire flight. That'd be just fine. That's one place where my rules about video games would, we do a video game. I just want good behavior for the whole flight.
I'm guilty of that. Using.
On the other hand, I'm seeing smart, fully verbal adult teenagers addicted to video games, not learning life skills, not learning how to work, not learning shopping, not learning how to order food in restaurants. I see too many parents that are kind of afraid to let go. So I see somebody who graduates from college magna cum laude, and they don't handle the workplace well, and they end up in the bedroom. Never learned a work skill. No, you've got to start learning how to do things on a schedule outside the home, starting at around age 11, like maybe a church volunteer job, helping out an elderly neighbor. Somebody outside the family needs to be the boss. They've got to learn that early, and they need to learn things like if they can read, how to order food in restaurants. I was doing that at a very young age.
That's, and I know you're a big proponent of work skills.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. And for fully verbal autistics, I have this book right here, Visual Thinking.
Can I take
different types of jobs for different kinds of minds, but that's on the really high end of the spectrum.
If you could hold up that book, I'd love to take a screenshot of, yes.
All right.
Wait, can you move it to the left so I can, yeah, perfect. Oh no, I want to see your face.
Oh, okay.
There.
All right, we can do it like that.
That, 1 second, 1 second, one more here. So there. Perfect. Because I want to buy a bunch of those books for the conference and then we're going to hand them out.
Well, that book would be aimed for people that are fully speaking.
Mm,
It wouldn't be that useful for
okay.
People with more severe problems. See, this is the problem with autism is we got this great big spectrum. And then in my book, my autobiography, Thinking in Pictures, I talk about my experiences with medication.
Mm,
And when I hit puberty, horrendous panic attacks, just horrendous. My fear system was turned on for no reason whatsoever. It was horrible. And as I went through my 20s, colitis attacks, worse and worse and worse. Everything went through me, just terrible. Fear system was on high alert. And then I went on a low dose of an old drug called imipramine. I then switched over to disipramine. It's all explained in Thinking in Pictures. And the colitis cleared up. My nervous system was no longer in a constant state of stress. And I'm still on the medication. Now, there's way too many drugs given out to little kids like candy. It's absolutely atrocious, totally atrocious. But on the other hand, I've been on medication since 1980, and I don't even know if I'd be alive today if I hadn't gone on that medication. My nervous system it was like an engine racing. Engine just racing. You know, you put some in floor the accelerator when you're in neutral.
mm,
And when I took this medication, it was like adjusting the carburetor screw on an old-fashioned carburetor. I know people don't know what that is now, but it's one of the most beautiful analogies because you can turn this screw and make the engine idle at just the right speed, not too fast and not slow that it stalls. And that's what I felt like taking the medication was like, but it was a low dose of an antidepressant. The mistake made with antidepressants when they're used for anxiety is too high a dose. And then you are going to get agitation and insomnia. I have probably talked to 100 parents over the years. Oh, we tried a little bit of Prozac. It was great. We doubled the dose. It was horrible. We'll never touch that drug again. They should have stayed on the very low dose. Starter dose or lower. And it's fully, even though this book's 25 years old, the drugs haven't changed. They're still the same meds. And I'm taking one med, and it really worked. This is the other thing. Let's say you try a med. You try one thing at a time, see what works. Don't start a new diet or a new school at the same time. Then you don't know what worked.
Right.
And some of the atypical drugs have really horrible problems with weight gain. That's just, atrociously bad.
This is a good segue actually into the next theme that the parents want your help
Yeah.
on, and that has to do with, communication barriers. As you know, some autistic children are nonverbal or
Yes.
have limited speech, and parents may worry about their child's ability to express needs, emotions, or pain. And I know that you mentioned in many of your talks that you also have gone through those communication challenges
Oh, I
early
got
on.
I can remember the frustration of not being able to talk. And I go on my screen now. I had no other way of communicating. Got to give them some way to communicate. Even if it's just a picture board, something to communicate with. Now, on nonverbals, I'm a big proponent of trying to teach typing and eventually getting to independent typing. And tablets are readily available. Some can learn to do it on a phone. Phones are real little, but that print has to appear next to that keyboard. That's really important. And then there's other devices where you can punch different pictures and things, and it talks. But they've got to have something to communicate with. That's just essential.
But then how do you work with your child who doesn't have so-called, I don't like this term nonverbal because I think every child communicates in different ways. But what about the low verbal child or the child that's not able to make sounds and the parent is just not knowing, how do they improve their communication with
A
their
lot of
children?
these nonverbals will take the parent's hand and lead them to the thing they want.
Right.
I hear that all the time, or they'll point at the thing that they want. But a way to communicate is essential.
Mhm. Um, just out of interest, and I know it's probably on the parents' mind is um, when you were starting to have those challenges early on, um, how did you display your frustrations, or how were you able to get through to the other person what your needs were?
Well, when I had no speech at all, it was screaming, and was one of the ways I did. The other thing that was very frustrating is since I have slow processor speed, sometimes I wasn't given time to explain. I remember when I was 5 years old, I was very frustrated. I could talk now, but I was slow to respond. And we had a little exercise where I had to mark all the pictures that began with B as in beautiful, like bicycle, a bird. And I marked a suitcase down as B for bag.
Mm,
Because in our house, there were bags. And they just marked it wrong, and they didn't give me time to explain that. It was a bag in my mind, not a suitcase. I remember that. That was very frustrating. They didn't give me time to explain that I really did understand the B as in beautiful concept in the pictures. I was 5. I was verbal and talking, but slow to respond.
mm. And we see that in our many of our parents that share their stories. We see that in our children with auditory processing issues, where they know exactly what they want to say, but it takes 10 seconds
Yeah.
before somebody else says something, and now they have to encode and decode all over again.
Well, you see, they got a slow processor speed. It's like a phone with 1 bar service trying to download a web page.
Hmm.
You've got to give it time to respond. Yes, and I do have some auditory processing problems. And when grown-ups talked fast, when I was little, it sounded like gibberish. Slow down when you talk and give time to respond. Really, really important.
I
And
tell
then of course, if there's a lot of background noise, it kind of makes me functionally deaf in places where there's background noise.
I think I learned that as every parent who has this issue of auditory processing is really count. I used to count out on my fingers how many seconds it took her to say hi after I said hello, and that's the number of seconds I would tell the teacher and say, give her 10 seconds
Yep,
for her to decode what you just
yep,
told her
that's right.
and
That's right.
encode it and then decode it. Um, and I would force myself to not interrupt her and say, okay, I have to wait out the 10 seconds. I have to wait out the 10 seconds. Um, so, and you talk a lot about that too, the slow to response in many of your talks with our children. So
And
very
I
good.
have problems with interrupting, and I know it's rude. I just can't time when to interrupt, and I do interrupt. I can't. Processor speed is slow. I have problems with fast chit chat conversations that people do in restaurants when there's a lot of background noise. I don't. I can't hear.
Mm. What are some things that you even now you wrestle with as an adult in terms of noises?
Well, I do some interrupting and really fast chit chat conversation. It's almost where people get in a chit chat conversation where they're kind of laughing in unison. I can't get into that rhythm. I just don't have the processor speed. So what tends to happen to me at a party is I'll find one person to talk to, And then I've had to learn not to talk their ear off. I've had to learn that.
Mm. Yeah. I think all of us in general, as human beings, we have our ways to adjust to environments that we find uncomfortable. Um,
And then another issue is scratchy clothes.
mm,
And one thing I'd recommend, all underwear needs to be washed. New underwear needs to be washed. Everything that goes against my skin, I wash before I wear it. And there's quite a lot of difference in the softness of different fabrics. There's no way I'm going to wear wool against my skin. But even a pair of pants that are quite soft when I first buy them, to be good enough for a long plane ride might take 3 washings.
mm, mm. The the other theme, which is our last theme that we wanted to get your help on, is the good old ABA therapy. Many therapies like ABA, applied behavior analysis, or speech therapy, can be expensive, and parents worry about the cost of long-term therapy and whether insurance will cover these essential services. And my question to you is, how can parents balance the need for ABA therapy recommendations and school for their children who have limited downtime in this whole entire process, and their day is spent on correcting their behaviors or teaching them how to do things differently? And I would like your thoughts on
Well, I think ABA was
what is that?
originally developed as a little kids program to get them ready for first grade. That's what it was originally developed for. And I think when they get older, we need to be doing much more kind of natural kinds of ways of teaching. Like in the 50s, let's say I've got my drink right here. I've stirred this with my finger. That's kind of rude. Mother didn't scream no. She'd tell me what I was supposed to do. Use the spoon to stir the drink. People think that's disgusting when you stick your finger. She would quietly give me the instruction on what to do. In the 50s, we call that a teachable moment. Give the instruction instead of screaming no. Also, some of the ABA stuff, especially when a person gets older, is just too rigid. And you want to do things naturally. One really good ABA therapist said, well, I had a client that they were trying to teach him to set the table, and he threw all the tableware across the room. But what they were doing is not what you actually do. Normally, you set the table, you eat, and then you clean it up. You don't unset the table 10 times in a row. And it was a nonverbal client. He chucked all the silverware across the room. And no, let's start, we set the table, we eat, and then we clean it up. Do the tasks, the more natural way. You see, there's a lot of kind of arbitrary stuff. Also, somebody who's non-speaking knows the difference between real work and busy work, where it's not real work. Okay, if they were working in a restaurant, rolling silverware and napkins, that's real work. Putting pegs in a board, that's not real work. They do know the difference. The other thing I always ask parents, is the child or the adult improving? You're doing all this stuff. Are they actually improving? Now, I talk to parents of little kids and 3-year-olds, and what do I want out of a 3-year-old? It's real simple. I want speech. I want the ability to wait and take turns, all kinds of little games, and skills like brushing their teeth, washing their hands, dressing. And the child should like going to therapy. And what I've observed is that some teachers have the knack, regardless of the name of the therapy, to engage these kids and get them to improve. So if you're doing something where they're improving, then you're doing the right thing. But I think as they get older, you can don't go overboard on therapy. You're just doing endless things and not much is happening. And the other thing I found when I did some volunteering at therapeutic writing is I found I had to fight saying good job, good job, good job, because it breaks the flow. And I remember one little girl, I don't know what her diagnosis was, she didn't speak, like 4 years old, and he was on the horse, and she got kind of mad, and she chucked the ball, and I just said, you chucked it, I gotta go get it. Then I turned around, she was sitting on the horse, and I said, I'm gonna throw you the ball, and you're gonna throw it back. And she did it. And then she smiled. treated it more like a normal activity. I think sometimes some of this stuff can get really rigid. And then another young man who didn't speak, I motioned like this to close the stall door. The stall door was a sliding door, and I just went like this, and he shut the door. You know, he knew exactly what I wanted, and do stuff that's more natural. But are you getting progress? Because there's a point where you can repeat something over and over and over again, and they're not learning anything. It just gets ridiculous, and sometimes you need to make the task a lot more natural.